Hey guys, can we point a firearm at somebody while we're clearing a house during a burglary call? My name is Anthony Bandiero, attorney and senior legal instructor for Blue to Gold Law Enforcement Training, bringing you to Roadside Chat. All right, so this question comes from an officer in South Dakota. He says, look, recently we had a couple officers read some case law about officers pointing guns at unarmed people on traffic stops being considered excessive force. They then translate this into when we clear buildings for a burglary call, we can only use flashlights. We cannot actually have our guns out and pointed, in the area they were clearing because, God forbid, we actually point this gun at somebody and point the gun at somebody that can be considered excessive force. So, what about if we're making proper announcements prior to entry, nobody responds, we actually think that somebody could be in the building. Can you, explain what's kind of going on here? What is your thoughts? Absolutely. All right. What the officers are referring to, the ones that say that we have to be very careful about, using our firearms and pointing them and so forth, what they are referring to is a case called Chinaryan versus City of Los Angeles, 9th Circuit, 2024. Okay, essentially what happened to this, and I have a video on my channel about this case if you want to go see that in more detail. It's basically high-risk traffic stops and pointing guns. All right, in a nutshell, here's what happened. Air unit in LAPD picks up a low jack hit. It's in a warehouse district. It's described as a black Tahoe. Units get into the area. They no longer pick up, the air unit's no longer picking up that, that low jack hit, but they're looking for the Tahoe. They see a black Tahoe and it has a license plate on it. They run that plate and it comes back to a Dodge Ram truck. So far, so good. Now the signal that the low jack is still not indicating that that's a stolen vehicle, but at the same time, they could have turned it off or it could have malfunctioned and so forth. It is a black Tahoe in the same area. The plate's not matching that vehicle. They then get other units in the area, behind the primary vehicle. I think they get like 5, patrol cars to do a high-risk traffic stop. Our driver, while she's being, followed, right, by LAPD, she is following all traffic laws. She's not blowing any stop signs. She's not acting suspicious. LAPD lights her up and she immediately pulls over. She's following all commands. She also has a child, I think at least 1 or 2 kids in the car, and she's put on the ground, prone. All the while they're pointing guns at her. And she's not the right person, okay? The car was not stolen. It was basically a comedy of errors, if you want to put it that way, because not only does she have, a black Tahoe, which is relatively a generic and kind of popular vehicle, but not only was driving a similar vehicle as the one stolen, the license plate on her car, the one that came back to a Dodge Ram pickup, well, that was a DMV error. They were off by 1 digit, and they gave the Ram her plates, and they gave the Tahoe the Ram plates. So even that ended up being, not accurate. But the thing is, at the end of the day, the 9th Circuit said, hey, you have reasonable suspicion, okay, that the vehicle is stolen. No doubt about it. We're going to make the stop. That's not the issue. The issue is, based on what you saw here, you're pointing a gun, a deadly force. You're essentially threatening deadly force at a person who at most has reasonable suspicion of committing a property crime. She wasn't running, she wasn't furtive movements, she wasn't fleeing. There was nothing in the call about the car being stolen with a gun. This was not a carjacking case. This was a car that was stolen on the side of the road, a parking spot. And you're threatening deadly force and you're pointing guns at her and her kids and you're proning them all out on the ground. That is excessive based on what you know. Now we can disagree. Okay, I mean, I do understand where the 9th Circuit is coming from. I mean, I have to tell you, if I was driving, let's say a rental car that was, unbeknownst to me, reported stolen, but it got returned to, to the rental car place, and I'm driving down the highway and I get pulled over and I'm going to be completely compliant and I get pulled over and, they're pointing an AR-15 at me and they're like, hey, why are you doing that? I mean, I'm not even, indicative of armed and dangerous. This is just maybe potentially I'm involved in a property crime. I guess I would maybe feel the same way as Chinaryan. Now, let's make sure though, one other thing. When LAPD was sued over this issue, right? There's a couple things I want to make note. Number one is when they were asked, like, during the deposition, when the officers were asked, why did you point the gun at that driver? They said pretty much two things, which is noteworthy. Number one, we were trained that way. Well, you cannot train cops to be unconstitutional, right? In other words, if cops are trained to do something unconstitutional, we cannot get out of liability by saying we were trained that way. If that was the case, well, then it wouldn't matter what you train them. Just train them to do whatever and just tell the court I was trained that way. Number two is they talked about generalities about, car thieves are generally speaking dangerous people. And therefore that justifies our high risk tactics. Well, the court wasn't so convinced, okay? They don't, and that I agree with, right? We cannot intrude on people's freedom and liberty and so forth by just saying generic things like, that's the way I was trained, or these people are always dangerous. You got to look at the circumstances you are confronted with. Now, at the end of the day, the result of that case, at least in the Ninth Circuit, is this. You can have your gun out, right, during a high-risk stop. You just can't necessarily point it at the person unless you have some other factors that lead you to believe that the person can be armed and dangerous. So you can have the gun at the low ready, the South Sul, whatever you guys want to call it. You can have the gun at the side position behind your leg, no problem. What this case was about was pointing the guns at them and throwing them out with nothing more than potentially possessing a stolen vehicle. Now, let's fast forward to the case at hand, okay? First of all, this is a South Dakota case which does not fall under the Ninth Circuit. So this is not binding precedent to my officers in South Dakota, but that doesn't mean we should not consider it, okay? I teach cases from all around the nation, and yeah, they may not be binding authority upon you, but buyer beware. I mean, if you are going to ignore the case and be like, that's just Ninth Circuit garbage, well, if you're in a very similar situation, your courts are going to consider what happened in Ninth Circuit and say, look, does that apply here, right? And the second thing is that really at the end of the day, the burglary call is different, okay? Burglary suspects, the nature of the crime itself is armed and dangerous, right? See, stealing a car, fine, I don't want to downplay it or, whatever, but it is a property crime, okay? A lot of these people are dangerous, but they're going to act dangerous. Burglary suspects are almost by definition armed and dangerous. They normally have pry tools. They often have weapons to overcome resistance. And so this is going to be, when you're clearing the house, it's going to be an armed and dangerous situation. So therefore, entering a home after, of course, making your proper announcements and clearing and so forth, and coming upon a subject who's hiding under a bed, most cops are going to point a gun at that person and tell them, show me your hands, get from out of the bed, don't move, stuff like that, and it's going to be just fine. That's not a Chinaryan type of situation. I hope this helps. This is what I'm here for. Please keep asking your questions. Visit us at bluetogold.com. Check out our classes. We answer all these questions in class. We have amazing training. It's absolutely cutting edge. It's the best of the best search and seizure training. Also, check out the search and seizure books. So, you like what we're doing? Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Until next time, my friends, stay safe.